Last year, I was trying to sell my 2010 Honda Civic. It had some wear and tear, but overall it was still in good condition for a car that old. I decided to list it on Craigslist because I'd sold some things there before, and it usually went smoothly. I took several pictures of the car and posted the ad with a fair asking price. The first day passed without any inquiries, but the second day I got a text from a guy named Mike. He seemed interested right away, which was great because I was hoping for a quick sale. Mike said he could come by the next evening after work to check it out. He wanted to meet around 8:30 p.m., which seemed a little late, but I agreed. I gave him my address and didn't think much of it. My house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and the car was parked in my driveway, so I didn't feel too worried. The following night, Mike pulled up right on time. He got out of his car, and I saw he was a tall guy, probably 6'2", with a muscular build and short, dark hair. He seemed friendly enough at first, shaking my hand and chatting a bit. We walked over to the Civic, and I showed him the car. He looked it over, asking the usual questions, and then asked if he could take it for a test drive. I agreed, and I got in the passenger seat while he drove. Mike drove around the neighborhood slowly, testing out the brakes and listening to the engine. Everything seemed to be going well, and he even mentioned that the car was in good shape for its age. I started to feel confident that he would buy it. We finished the test drive and pulled back into my driveway. But then, after getting out of the car, Mike said he'd have to think about it. He asked me if he could sleep on it and get back to me tomorrow. I nodded, a little disappointed but understanding. We were about to part ways when Mike suddenly asked, "Mind if I use your bathroom real quick?" Something about the request made me uneasy. Why would he need to use my bathroom if he wasn't even going to buy the car? I politely told him no, saying I wasn't comfortable with strangers coming inside my house. He gave me a weird look, but didn't argue. Instead, he lingered around for a moment, making me feel uneasy. I told him it was late and I needed to go inside. As I turned to head back toward my front door, I had this strange feeling that Mike wasn't done. I glanced back, and sure enough, he was still standing there by the car, watching me. My heart started to race. I decided not to go straight into my house. Instead, I walked down the side of the house, pretending to check something, hoping Mike would leave. When I reached the back corner of the yard, I crouched down, staying out of sight. I waited for a few minutes, hearing nothing, but then I heard footsteps. I peeked around the corner and saw Mike walking toward the front of my house. He wasn't heading to his car, he was moving toward my front door. At this point, adrenaline kicked in. I snuck around the back, unlocked the side gate quietly, and slipped into my backyard. There was a small shed where I kept some tools, and I crouched behind it, watching. Mike reached the front door, and instead of knocking, I saw him pulling something out of his pocket. It looked like a tool of some sort. I grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering into the phone about what was happening. While I stayed hidden, I could see Mike trying to break into my house. He jiggled the door handle, then started messing with the lock. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was afraid he might hear it. A few minutes later, I heard sirens in the distance. Mike must have heard them too, because he suddenly stopped what he was doing and started walking quickly back to his car. But it was too late. The police cars pulled up just as he was reaching for the door handle. 2 officers got out, and after a brief confrontation, they arrested him. When I finally came out of hiding, the police told me that Mike had a criminal record. He'd been involved in several robberies before, using Craigslist ads as a way to find easy targets. I couldn't believe how close I'd come to being his next victim. Story the end.
Story number 2.
One time, I was searching Craigslist for a new couch. I had just moved into my first apartment and needed furniture, but I didn't have a lot of money to spend. After a couple of weeks of checking listings, I found a couch that seemed like a steal. It wasn't too far from my place in a neighboring suburb, and the pictures showed a clean, modern couch that looked like it would fit perfectly in my living room. The ad was posted by a guy named Tom. He said he was moving out of state and was trying to sell his furniture quickly, which was why it was so cheap. I messaged him, and he responded within an hour saying the couch was still available. He gave me an address and told me to come by after 8 p.m. since he would be working during the day. The timing worked for me, so I agreed. The next evening, I got the cash, plugged the address into my GPS, and drove to the house. It was a quiet neighborhood about 15 minutes away. The house looked normal, older but well kept. I parked out front and knocked on the door. Tom answered, and he looked like a regular guy in his late 40s with a friendly smile. He invited me in, saying the couch was in the basement since he had been packing up the rest of the house. I followed him down the stairs, and the basement seemed cluttered with boxes and furniture. When we got to the bottom of the stairs, I looked around but didn't see the couch. Tom pointed to a back room and said it was just through there. I walked ahead and opened the door to the room. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. It was pitch black and I couldn't see a thing. I turned to say something, but the door slammed shut behind me before I could react. I heard the click of the lock, trapping me inside. I banged on the door, yelling for Tom, but there was no response. My heart started racing as I felt around the walls, looking for a light switch, but there was none. After a few moments of panic, I heard movement outside the door. Tom was talking to someone else, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I yelled again, but no one answered. I pulled out my phone to try calling for help, but there was no signal in the room. I tried texting, but nothing would go through. The air in the room was thick, and I felt trapped. The only light came from the faint glow of my phone screen, but it wasn't enough to see anything. I started banging on the door again, hoping to break it down, but then I heard footsteps approaching. I quickly stepped back from the door as it slowly creaked open. A different man walked in this time, much taller and heavier than Tom. He was holding something in his hand that glinted in the dim light. My heart pounded as I realized I needed to act fast. I threw my phone as hard as I could towards the far side of the room, creating a distraction. The man turned to look in that direction, and I seized the moment. I rushed past him, narrowly avoiding his grasp, and bolted out of the room. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, hearing the heavy footsteps behind me as he chased after me. When I reached the top of the stairs, Tom was standing there, blocking the door. I didn't slow down. I shoved him aside with all my strength and burst out of the house, sprinting toward my car. I fumbled with my keys but managed to unlock the car just as Tom and the other man reached the front door. I jumped in, slammed the door, and sped off as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was halfway home. My hands were shaking and I could barely catch my breath. Once I felt safe, I pulled over and called the police. They met me at a nearby parking lot, and I told them everything. We drove back to the house together, but when we arrived, the house was dark and no one was there. The place was completely empty, and the police couldn't find any trace of Tom or the other man. The Craigslist post had disappeared by the time I checked again. I never found out who they were or what they wanted, but I knew one thing: I was never going to buy anything off Craigslist again. Story the end.
Story number 3.
I'm a male, and this happened about 3 years ago when I was living in Houston, Texas. I was selling my old laptop on Craigslist after upgrading to a new one. The laptop was in perfect condition, only about a year old, and I figured it would sell quickly. I wasn't looking to make a huge profit, so I set the price fairly low, hoping for a quick sale. After posting the ad, it didn't take long before I received a message from someone named Jordan. She said she was interested in buying the laptop and wanted to meet up. We texted back and forth for a bit, and everything seemed normal. Jordan told me she was in the area and that we could meet at a nearby coffee shop the next day. It was a public place, which made me feel more comfortable, so I agreed. The next day, I packed up the laptop and drove to the coffee shop. Jordan arrived on time, and the transaction went smoothly. She seemed polite, nothing out of the ordinary, and after she tested the laptop, she paid me in cash, and we parted ways. I figured that was the end of it. However, 2 days later, I received a text from Jordan. It wasn't about the laptop, which was strange. Instead, she asked if I wanted to hang out. I politely declined, thinking she might be confused or joking. But then she kept texting me, asking if she could come over to my place or if I wanted to meet somewhere. I found it odd, especially since we had only met for the laptop sale, but I tried to brush it off. I told her I wasn't interested in meeting up, but that didn't seem to stop her. Over the next few days, the texts became more frequent and a bit unsettling. She started sending messages late at night, asking where I was and what I was doing. I started to worry when she mentioned something about knowing my schedule, even though I never told her anything personal. I tried ignoring her, but that seemed to make her more persistent. I eventually blocked her number, hoping that would put an end to the situation. But it didn't. A few nights later, I was relaxing at home when I heard a knock on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole and saw Jordan standing there. My stomach dropped. How had she found my address? I hadn't given it to her. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. After a few moments, I decided to answer the door but kept it on the chain lock. When I opened it just a crack, Jordan immediately started asking why I had blocked her and why I wasn't responding to her messages. She was angry, her voice raised, and she seemed agitated. I calmly told her that she needed to leave and that I wasn't interested in any kind of relationship. But instead of leaving, she pushed the door harder, trying to get inside. I quickly shut the door and locked it. I was shaken. For the next few minutes, she banged on the door, yelling and demanding to be let in. I grabbed my phone and called the police, explaining the situation. I hoped she would leave before they arrived, but instead, she started walking around the house, knocking on the windows and trying the back door. I warned her through the window that I had called the police, but she didn't care. She stayed, pacing around the house like she was waiting for something. Finally, after what felt like forever, the police arrived. They spoke to her for a while, then took her away. I was told later that she had some history of mental health issues, but I never found out the full story. I ended up filing for a restraining order, and I've been a lot more cautious with online transactions ever since. You never really know who you're dealing with, even if they seem normal at first. Story the end.
Story number 4.
I have a Craigslist horror story that I want to share, as a warning to anyone using these websites. A few months ago, I decided to sell my old electric guitar. It was a high-end Fender Stratocaster that I rarely used anymore, and I thought I could get good money for it. The guitar was in excellent condition, and I listed it for $1,200, a fair price considering its age and quality. Within a few hours of posting the ad, I received a message from a guy named Steve. He said he was very interested in buying the guitar and was willing to pay the full price. I was thrilled, as I knew it was a good deal and I really needed the money. We exchanged a few texts, and he seemed polite enough. We agreed to meet at a well-lit gas station near my neighborhood in Denver around 9 p.m. He claimed he worked late and couldn't meet any earlier. It seemed a little odd, but I was desperate to make the sale. On the day of the meeting, Steve texted me that he was running late and asked if we could push the meetup to 10 p.m. I was hesitant, but agreed. I didn't feel comfortable meeting someone that late, but it was a public place, and I figured I'd be safe. As a precaution, I asked my friend Mark to come along with me. We got to the gas station around 9:45 and waited. Around 10:05, Steve texted me saying he had arrived but was parked around the corner. He claimed his car was having issues, and he couldn't drive into the lot. He asked if I could walk over with the guitar so he could inspect it. That should have been a red flag, but I was so eager to get the sale done that I convinced myself it was okay. I left Mark by the car and walked around the corner with the guitar in its case. As I turned the corner, I saw an old, beat-up van parked at the side of the road. The windows were tinted, and I couldn't see inside. I texted Steve again, asking if this was his vehicle. He replied almost immediately, saying yes, and asked me to come closer. My gut was telling me to turn around, but I was already there. I approached the van cautiously, and as I got closer, I saw the side door slide open. 3 men, all wearing dark hoodies and ski masks, jumped out. One of them grabbed my arm, while another tried to snatch the guitar case from me. I was in shock, but instinct took over. I swung the guitar case as hard as I could, hitting one of them in the chest. The guy stumbled back, and I took that moment to break free and run.
Story number 5.
For a little bit of background to this story, I live in a small town called Maplewood, located just on the edge of rural Wisconsin. The houses are spaced apart, and most properties are a couple of acres large, giving everyone plenty of privacy. I live here with my husband, but at the time this happened, he was out of town on a business trip for a week. I had just finished up some yard work and was settling in for a quiet evening. As I was getting ready to relax, I noticed a text message from an unknown number pop up on my phone. It was strange because I don't give my number out to just anyone. The message said, "Hey, I saw your post on Craigslist, and I'm interested in the item you're selling. Can I come by to take a look?" I was confused. I've never used Craigslist before, and I certainly wasn't selling anything. I texted back, "I think you've got the wrong number. I'm not selling anything." Within minutes, the person replied with my full address. "This is your address, right?" My stomach dropped. How did this person know where I lived? It was unsettling, to say the least. I tried to brush it off as a prank or mistake, but something didn't sit right with me. I called my husband to see if maybe he had listed something online without telling me, but he had no idea what I was talking about. He told me to just ignore it, so I decided not to respond anymore. Hours passed, and I had almost forgotten about the strange text when, around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed again. It was the same number. The message read, "So, can I come over or not?" At this point, I was more annoyed than scared. I replied, "No. I already told you I'm not selling anything. Please stop messaging me." I put my phone down and tried to relax, hoping that would be the end of it. But around 11:30 p.m., I received another text. This one simply said, "I'm here." A chill ran down my spine. I walked over to the front window and peeked out through the blinds. My house is surrounded by thick woods, and with no streetlights, the area is pitch black at night. I couldn't see anything or anyone. I closed the blinds and locked the door, telling myself it was probably just some kid playing a prank. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. "Check the back window." My heart raced. I froze for a moment, staring at the screen, unsure of what to do. Slowly, I walked towards the back of the house. The kitchen window faced the backyard, and I hesitated before looking out. When I finally pulled the curtain aside, my heart nearly stopped. There, standing in the dark, just outside the window, was a man. He was tall, his face pale and blank, with eyes that seemed far too wide. He was grinning, but there was something wrong with his expression. Something unhinged. He didn't move, just stared at me through the glass, his breath fogging up the window slightly. I stumbled backward, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. As I waited for the operator to answer, I kept my eyes on the window, but the man didn't move an inch. Finally, after what felt like forever, the operator picked up, and I quickly explained the situation. They dispatched officers to my house, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. The police searched the woods around my house but found nothing. No footprints, no sign that anyone